and welcome to my channel. I am Andrea and this is Beyond the Pink Door. So today I am going to make the Wardrobe by Me Mirri dress. So this is described as a body-hugging faux wrap dress with a shawl-like collar and flattering pleats. The skirt is fitted through the high hip area and flared at the hem. The pattern has 4 length options and it is for jersey fabric. It's also described as a project perfect for the adventurous beginner. So fabrics suggested are lightweight jersey fabric and fibres such as cotton, viscose, silk or other lightweight fabric. You will achieve the best results with a fabric with drape and lycra in the composition. So the pattern comes in either paper form or a PDF file, and even though I have the paper pattern in my shop, I'm really not a fan of tracing, and I have an A0 printer now, so I decided to buy the PDF version and print it out. And what I really liked about the PDF version was that it is layered, so you don't have to print out the entire sheet of all the different sizes. So generally when something is layered, I will print out, say, 2 sizes on the one sheet. And for instance here I couldn't decide between the 8 and the 10, so I printed both on the one sheet, so you can see the 2 lines there, and I decided to go for the 10. I just thought, okay, I think that ease will just suit me the best. So here are the 4 skirt options. So there's a top, a short skirt, a midi length and a long skirt. So I'm actually going to make this one here because I figure it'll be the right kind of length that I'm looking for. So the pattern is actually drafted for somebody of 5'8". I'm only 5 foot, but I have held the View C skirt up against myself, and I think that's going to be around the right length, and if it's not, I'll shorten it up anyway. I think View B is shorter than I'd like. So it looks like an interesting make. I've read through the instructions and it seems very straightforward. I have all my pattern pieces cut out. I have decided on a size 10. I think that'll give me the fit that I want. And yeah, I have all my pieces here. I have a lovely cotton jersey that I've chosen. It's this fabric, so it's got a navy background and it's called Stardust. It's got pink and white speckles all over it. I do have this in another version in the shop with like a turquoise, and I was very close to making that, but I do love the pink. So I have this all ready to go. I've also got some stretch interfacing. It doesn't say that it needs it in the pattern, but after washing the fabric it has curled quite a bit. So it's done a lot of rolling here on the edge. And there is a little pattern piece for like a little cap finish here. And I think it'll be the easiest used if it's got a little bit of interfacing on it. And I've also made one other little change as well. So the 2 fronts of the bodices are cut out separately. So one of them has pleats, this one here, and the other one doesn't have pleats. So I'm going to be very careful on cutting these out because I only have to cut one of each. And there's a self-facing on here. So that basically folds back on the inside. So what I've done is I've actually made another pattern piece which is the same as this here, so that I'm going to cut out some interfacing, and I'm going to iron interfacing just onto the back there where the self-facing is. So here it is. So that's the changes I've made so far. So I'm going to lay out my fabric and I'm going to place my pattern pieces and just show you how I'm going to cut it out. So I'm all ready to cut out. So up here I have my 2 bodice pieces. This is a single layer of fabric. So I have the right piece, you can see the little pleats there. And then this is the left side. I have one skirt here ready to cut out on the fold. I'll cut that and then I'll move the pattern piece down here. And then this is the little shoulder kind of sleevey thing. So I will cut out two there wherever they fit, and then I have my interfacing here ready, and I'll cut a piece of interfacing for that as well. Now, what I forgot to mention in the pattern layout was that there's a back piece, obviously. It's to be cut out on the fold, but in order to make best use out of the fabric, I actually cut it out in two pieces. So I'm actually going to sew a seam there and overlock, and that's going to be the first thing I'll do. So possibly if I make this dress again, I will find a better way of getting it out of the fabric. So here's the left front, and the only pattern marking to do is here, which is a little spot to show the center front. And then this is the right one, and this one has a center front marking as well. It's also got the pleat markings. So there's my point. I've made a little notch here at where this joins up to here. I've made another little notch here and another notch over here. And I'm going to first of all iron my interfacing onto these two pieces. And then what I've decided to do on my piece for the sleeve band is I've actually ironed a piece. I think you should be able to see it there. I've ironed a piece of interfacing onto the actual fabric because I find this easier. So what I'm going to do now, it is quite tight, is I'm actually going to cut them out individually, because I find by the time I've cut this out it will have curled and then it's just a bit tricky to interface it. So this works a little bit easier, I find. So I have my interfacing here, it's ironed on, and the great thing about this interfacing is it doesn't take away from the stretch of the fabric, it just gives a little bit more body and it stops these edges here from curling. So you can see here they're starting to curl already. Now I've read through the instructions and I have to admit I'm really confused about how to do the pleats on the wrong side, so I'm just going to go back to the way I would interpret it myself. And I'm going to zoom in here. Now I've just zoomed in, so hopefully you'll be able to see better. I have the little notch there, there, and there. So what I'm going to do is fold the fabric and bring the point to the notch and pin it in place, and then fold this little corner, bring the point to the notch, and pin it, and the same here, fold it up to the notch, fold it back and pin it in place. So then you have the three pleats there at the front. And what you want is all the layers of fabric to be in line here at the end. So I'm going to sew over those three sets of pleats just to hold them in place. So I've just sewn across here with a zigzag just to hold the pleats into place, and I've popped a few pins in just to keep those pleats out of the way. So I'm going slightly off the instructions here because what it wants you to do next is to put one on top of the other and sew them to the front skirt. Now I don't want to do that. I want to make the top of the dress and I want to make the skirt, and then I actually want to join them together, and that's simply because the dress is drafted for somebody of 5'8" and I'm only 5 foot, and I actually don't know what changes I may have to make to the length. So this will give me a better option for making length adjustments, maybe to the length here when I'm doing the fitting. So I've just laid one bodice piece on top of the other, and I'm pinning together up here. And I'm going to sew across there, and the seam allowance for this dress is 1/4 of an inch, so essentially you could make it on your overlocker. Now I don't trust the tension of my overlocker that it will all stay together, so I'm going to be zigzagging using my machine, and then I'm going to overlock. So I've done my seam here, and I've clipped a little bit into these corners. You'll see just a little clip there. And now we need to get our back piece. So here's the back. You can see my seam down the middle. There's my shoulder seams. And what we're going to do is place the seam into the centre back. It's actually quite handy that I have my seam there. If I turn it around, it might be just easier to see on the camera. And then I'm going to put my little notched piece here. And then pin this shoulder along the front shoulder. So that's front and back shoulders. And then we have the back neckline. And then we have the same on the other side. So we have our neckline. Matching up our shoulders. This little notch here allows us to get around the corner. Should be able to see that little corner there. So I'm starting at the armhole edge. Now here I come to my little notch. Now this is the back neckline. And I'm here of my other little corner. I'm just doing a back stitch there, just in case. I think I've gone over my seam allowance a little bit, but I've ironed my seams up that way, and I've also ironed along the crease of the interfacing. Now this made me realise how handy this interfacing is, because that gave me the exact fold over for the facing on the front. So the next thing we have to do is turn down our seam allowance here, just on the back piece, and bring it to meet the seam that we've just sewn. And the same here on the end. So I've done a little clip into the corner here, like I did on the other side. And I'm going to bring that there to meet the corner. Another pin there. And the same over here. Turn in the seam allowance and bring it to meet this corner. And I'm going to top stitch that down in place. So I've top stitched that in place, and then we have this little flappy bit from the front, and we have our seam here for the shoulder. So we're basically going to pin this little piece here and we're going to sew it there in place. We're going to do the same on the other side. Now, so here's our two fronts with our facing ironed to the back. I'm going to put a pin here to hold the facing back on both sides. So we have a notch here for our centre front, and we have a notch here. I've just put pins to see them that bit easier. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring the two pins together. Pull one out. And then that in place. And then this is under. And that's our wrap over. I'll put another pin just here. Now I'm actually going to sew across here to hold all of those in place. Now that's how it looks on the reverse. So I've just sewn all those different layers together so it'll make it easier to handle. Now we're going to do the side seams. So very simply, now I've just pinned the side seams from the front to the back, and I'm also going to make the sleeve cuffs. So I'm folding them right sides together, and I'm going to sew along the short ends. Okay, so we have the armhole here. I've made the cuffs, so there's the seam, and I folded them in half. I'm going to get the halfway point, and I've checked that there's no difference in length between the back and the front, so I'm going to pin that onto into the shoulder seam, and then I'm going to pin the seam of the cuff into the underarm seam. Now it is kind of like a neckband, so it is a little bit smaller than the actual opening. So just stretch it out to fit. and then we're going to sew around on the two. So I've taken the free arm off my sewing machine to make it easier, and I'm going to start under the arm and stretching out the band. I'm going to make sure that my shoulder seam still faces towards the back. We've got a little pucker there. Now I'm going to tidy up all my threads there, and I'm going to overlock around that. So I have my two skirt pieces here, and very simply I'm going to pin my two side seams, sew them and overlock them, and then it's a matter of attaching the skirt to the bodice. So I have my skirt here, wrong side out, and my bodice right side out, and I'm going to pop the bodice into the skirt and grab these side seams. Just give it a little shake. So my first pins are going to be into my side seams. And then I'm going to pin all around. I'm going to put plenty of pins in the front part. So this is just the back here. So where the front is and all the pleats, I'm just going to go and put plenty of pins. Making sure to keep the pleats and the layers flat. And now I'm going to sew all around here, and then I'm going to try it on for size. So here we are. The pleats are really nice in it, and the shoulder bands are lovely. It's quite a modest wraparound, so it is high. I had to do a little bit of faffing, but I think a little bit more pressing and I'll have all of that about right. It's quite long, So I'm kind of thinking up around there would be better. So I think that'll be about 3 inches shorter. Overall, I think it fits really nicely. It's very, very comfortable. That's how it looks. It seems to sit really nicely on the back. And yeah, so actually, the more I have it on, the more I'm liking this. Just to get that to sit a little touch better. So I hope you enjoyed that sew along. I'm not actually sure if this was the best colour to do a sew along. I hope you could see everything in it. I'm going to go and hem it now. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.